The crisp air of early December always carried with it a particular scent in our small town, a blend of pine needles, wood smoke curling from chimneys, and the subtle, sweet promise of something magical about to unfold. It was the scent of Christmas, and for me, it was inextricably linked to my grandfather, a man whose hands always smelled faintly of earth and old books, and whose eyes held the twinkling wisdom of 1,000 starry nights. Our story, the one that wove itself into the very fabric of our family's Christmas traditions, began on a blustery afternoon when the first delicate snowflakes began to dance in the air, landing softly on the frosted window panes of his cozy cottage. I must have been about 8 years old, a whirlwind of boundless energy and unquenchable curiosity. My grandmother was in the kitchen, the clinking of pots and pans a rhythmic counterpoint to the low hum of the old radio playing familiar carols. The aroma of cinnamon and cloves, baking apples, and her famous gingerbread cookies wafted through the house, a delicious, warm embrace that always made my stomach rumble with anticipation. Grandpa sat by the crackling fireplace, his favorite worn armchair enveloping him like an old friend. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, making the room feel even more intimate, a sanctuary from the biting cold outside. He was whittling a small wooden reindeer, the smooth, rhythmic scrape of his knife against the wood a comforting sound that spoke of patience and meticulous care. Sawdust, light and fragrant, dusted his trousers. I remember perching on the thick, braided rug at his feet, tracing the patterns with my finger, my breath visible in the cooler air away from the hearth. The silence was not empty, but full, filled with the warmth of the fire, the distant sounds from the kitchen, and the quiet contentment of being near him. "Grandpa," I began, my voice a small whisper in the gentle quiet, "tell me a story." He paused his whittling, looking up, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners as a slow smile spread across his face. His hands, gnarled and strong, carefully set the half-finished reindeer on the small, wooden table beside him. He reached out and gently ruffled my hair, a familiar gesture that always filled me with warmth. "A story, little one? What kind of story do you want today?" "A Christmas story," I insisted, my voice gaining a touch of eagerness. "A really, really special one." He chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that always seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. He leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look on his face, as if sifting through a lifetime of tales. The fire popped and hissed, and outside, the wind whispered secrets through the bare branches of the oak tree. "Well then," he began, his voice taking on the slow, deliberate cadence of a seasoned storyteller, "let me tell you about a promise. A promise made a long, long time ago, on a Christmas Eve just like this one is becoming." He cleared his throat, and I leaned in closer, my heart thumping with excitement. The air grew still, pregnant with anticipation. "Many, many years ago," he continued, his gaze distant, as if seeing into the past, "when I was just a boy, even smaller than you, our town was much different. There were fewer lights, fewer cars, and the winters, well, the winters felt even colder, the snow even deeper." I shivered, imagining a world without the cozy comforts I knew. That particular Christmas Eve, the snow had been falling for 2 whole days without stopping. It was piled high, higher than the fences, higher than the windowsills. We were snowed in, you see, completely cut off from the next village. He paused, a faint sigh escaping his lips. "My family was very poor then. We had enough food, thank goodness, but there was no money for fancy gifts, not even for new clothes. My younger sister, Ilara, she was just 4 years old, and she had been sick with a cough that wouldn't go away. Her cheeks were flushed, and her breathing was often shallow. My parents, they worried constantly, their faces etched with a silent anxiety that even a child could feel. I pictured a small, fragile girl, much like the dolls I sometimes played with, and a pang of sympathy went through me. "What happened, Grandpa?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Well," he continued, his voice softening, "Ilara had only one wish for Christmas. She didn't ask for toys or sweets. All she wanted, with all her heart, was a storybook. A real storybook, with colorful pictures. She loved stories, even more than I did, if that's possible. My mother used to tell her tales from memory, but Ilara longed for a book she could hold, a book she could look at and imagine all the worlds within its pages. We had no books in our house, not even one." My grandfather's eyes held a deep sadness for a moment before he continued. "My father, a strong man with hands as rough as tree bark, had tried to find one. He'd walked for miles through the snow to the next village a few days before, hoping to find a used book, anything for Ilara. But the storm came in too quickly, and he had to turn back. He came home defeated, his shoulders slumped, and Ilara, seeing his disappointment, tried to pretend she didn't mind. But I knew she did. I saw the way her little chin trembled, the way her eyes, usually so bright, dulled with a quiet sorrow. The fire crackled, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold and sadness in Grandpa's story. I imagined the weight of that disappointment, the heavy silence that must have fallen over their small home. On Christmas Eve, the snow was still falling thick and fast. It seemed as if the whole world was being swallowed by a vast, white blanket. My mother was baking what little she had, trying to make the house smell festive, but the joy felt thin, stretched. My father sat by the window, staring out at the blizzard, a deep frown etched between his eyebrows. Ilara was tucked into bed, her cough sounding harsher in the quiet house. I remember looking at her, her small face pale against the pillow, and my heart ached with a feeling I couldn't quite name, a mix of helplessness and a fierce desire to make things right. It was then, as the last sliver of daylight faded and the house was lit only by the flickering oil lamp and the glow of the fire, that I made a promise. My grandfather's voice grew softer, imbued with the weight of memory. I stood by Ilara's bed, holding her tiny hand, which felt surprisingly hot. I leaned down and whispered, "Ilara, don't worry. Tomorrow, on Christmas morning, you will have your storybook. I promise." I gasped softly. "But how, Grandpa? If there were no books?" He smiled faintly, a nostalgic warmth returning to his eyes. That's what I asked myself, even as the words left my lips. I had no idea how I would do it. I was just a boy, remember, with no money and no way to get to a store. But I knew, deep in my heart, that I had to keep that promise. The thought of Ilara waking up on Christmas morning, still sick, and without her one wish, was unbearable. The sound of my grandmother humming a carol drifted in from the kitchen, a gentle underscore to his words. I imagined the desperate resolve of a young boy, determined to bring joy to his ailing sister. I spent the rest of Christmas Eve wide awake, Grandpa continued, his voice filled with the quiet intensity of that memory. I lay in my bed, listening to the wind howl outside, feeling the cold seeping in through the cracks in the walls, and my mind raced. I thought of everything, every possibility, no matter how wild. I even considered trying to carve a book out of wood, but I knew that wouldn't be right. It wouldn't have the pictures, the stories. He paused, a far-off look in his eyes. Then, as the night grew deeper, and the fire in the hearth burned down to embers, an idea began to form. A small, flickering spark of an idea, born out of desperation and love. I remembered an old, discarded calendar my mother had kept in the back of the pantry. It was from the year before, full of colorful pictures of animals and landscapes. And I remembered the brown paper my father used to wrap his lunch for work, and the small pot of homemade glue my mother kept for mending things. My eyes widened. "You made one?" Grandpa nodded, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across his face. I crept out of bed, careful not to wake my parents or Ilara. The house was absolutely silent, save for the ticking of the old clock in the hall and the gentle sigh of the wind. I found the calendar, its pages a little dusty but its pictures still vibrant. I found the brown paper, rough and sturdy. And I found the glue, thick and smelling faintly of flour. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I worked by the dim light of the dying embers in the fireplace, my fingers clumsy with cold and urgency. I carefully cut out the pictures from the calendar, a majestic stag, a playful fox, a serene snowy owl. Then, I cut the brown paper into rectangles, folding them in half to make pages. With the homemade glue, I painstakingly pasted each picture onto a page, making sure they were smooth and secure. For the cover, I chose the most beautiful picture, a sweeping landscape of snow-covered mountains under a brilliant blue sky. I was completely captivated, imagining the small boy, working with such focused determination in the quiet, dark house. I could almost smell the faint scent of flour from the glue, feel the rough texture of the paper. Did it work, Grandpa? Did she like it? His smile grew wider, a radiant warmth spreading across his face. Oh, she did, little one. She absolutely did. I worked through the night, only finishing as the first hints of dawn began to paint the sky a pale, frosty pink. My fingers were stiff, and my eyes were tired, but my heart was full of a triumphant joy. I carefully placed the makeshift storybook by her bedside, next to the small, wooden bird my father had carved for her. He took a deep, contented breath, the memory clearly bringing him immense happiness. When Elara woke up, her eyes fluttered open slowly. She coughed, a little less harshly than the night before, and then her gaze fell upon the book. Her eyes widened, and a gasp, a small, joyful sound, escaped her lips. She reached out, her small fingers trembling as she picked up the book. She traced the pictures on the cover, her face glowing with a wonder I will never forget. She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears, and whispered, "You kept your promise, big brother. You really did." And in that moment, seeing the pure, unadulterated joy on her face, the way her entire being lit up, I knew it was the best Christmas gift I had ever given, or ever would give. It wasn't a store-bought book, not fancy or new. But it was made with love, with a promise, and with the fervent hope of a child for another child. My grandfather's voice was thick with emotion now, and I felt a prickle behind my own eyes. The warmth of the fire, the sweet scent of baking from the kitchen, the soft fall of snow outside, everything seemed to converge into this one poignant, beautiful story. From that day forward, he concluded, his voice regaining its steady, gentle rhythm, that promise became a part of our family's Christmas. Every year, on Christmas Eve, we would tell Elara's story, and we would remember the power of a promise made with love, and the joy of creating something truly special from nothing but a hopeful heart. He reached for the small, half-finished wooden reindeer again, resuming his whittling with a renewed sense of purpose. The rhythmic scraping of the knife filled the comfortable silence. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not just my grandfather, but the boy he once was, driven by love and a simple, heartfelt promise. The snowflakes continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in pristine white, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that this story, this promise, would be a part of my Christmases forever too. It was a story not just about a book, but about hope, resilience, and the profound, transformative power of love. The gentle aroma of my grandmother's fresh-baked bread now mingled with the cinnamon and clove, a comforting testament to the continuity of generations and traditions. The small, wooden reindeer slowly took shape in Grandpa's hands, each careful cut a whisper of the stories he carried within him. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sensory details of the room wash over me, the soft warmth of the rug beneath my hands, the gentle heat radiating from the fireplace, the distant clinking of dishes and the quiet hum of a Christmas carol. I could almost feel the rough texture of the brown paper pages and see the vibrant calendar pictures through my grandfather's vivid description. The world outside, muffled by the falling snow, felt far away, and our small living room, filled with the warmth of family and stories, felt like the safest, most magical place on earth. From that Christmas Eve onward, the story of Elara's book wasn't just a tale, it was a living tradition. Every year, as December's chill began to settle in, my grandfather would bring out a small, carefully preserved box from the attic. Inside, nestled among faded tissue paper, was a collection of other handmade books. Not just Elara's original one, which had long since become too fragile to touch, but new ones, crafted by each of us as we grew older. My parents, my aunts and uncles, and eventually my cousins and I, all contributed to this growing library of promises. Each book was unique, reflecting the maker's personality and the resources they had at hand. Some were made from old magazines, others from colorful fabric scraps, and a few even had intricate drawings and stories written in clumsy, childish handwriting. The rule was simple: on Christmas Eve, before any gifts were opened, we would gather around the fireplace, just as Grandpa and I had done that day, and each person would choose one of the handmade books. We'd take turns telling the story of that book, either recalling the memory of making it, or inventing a new, fantastical tale inspired by its pictures. It became a beautiful, tangible representation of the promise my grandfather had made, a reminder that the most precious gifts often came from the heart, crafted with love and a spirit of generosity, rather than purchased with money. One year, when I was about 12, it was my turn to make a book. I remember struggling with it, wanting it to be perfect, to live up to the legacy of Elara's book. I spent hours in my room, surrounded by old newspapers, discarded wrapping paper, and a rainbow of crayons. The air in my room was thick with the scent of paper and wax. My fingers were stained with ink and glue, and my brow was furrowed in concentration. I wanted my book to tell a story of adventure, a journey to a faraway land, filled with mythical creatures and hidden treasures. I cut out pictures from an old atlas, creating fantastical maps, and drew clumsy but enthusiastic depictions of dragons and fairies. The pages were a little uneven, the glue smudged in places, but when I finally presented it to Grandpa on Christmas Eve, his eyes, still twinkling with that familiar wisdom, held a look of profound approval. He ran his callous thumb over the rough cover, a silent acknowledgement of the effort and love I had poured into it. That evening, as the fire crackled merrily, casting warm, dancing shadows on our faces, I sat beside Grandpa, the warmth of his presence a comforting weight against my side. My grandmother, her silver hair shining in the firelight, gently hummed along to the silent carols playing in our hearts. My parents and aunts and uncles listened with the respectful attention that only truly cherished stories receive. I opened my handmade book, its pages rustling softly, and began to tell the story of a brave little mouse who ventured into a magical forest to find a lost star, a star that held the light of Christmas. I described the crunch of leaves under the mouse's tiny paws, the sweet scent of enchanted berries, the glistening dew on spiderwebs, and the deep, booming laughter of a friendly, ancient tree. As I spoke, I could feel the story come alive not just for me, but for everyone in the room. Their quiet breathing, the gentle nods, the occasional soft sigh, all told me they were right there with the little mouse, on his courageous journey. After I finished, a comfortable silence settled, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the gentle exhalation of a contented sigh from my grandmother. My aunt, Aunt Sophia, then picked up a book she had made years ago, a delicate creation with pressed dried flowers and poems she had written in elegant cursive. Her voice, soft and melodic, began to weave a tale of a winter garden that bloomed with magical lights on Christmas Eve, each flower a tiny beacon of hope and peace. I could almost smell the earthy fragrance of the pressed flowers, feel the smooth, cool texture of the paper, and hear the gentle rustle of invisible petals in the magical breeze she described. The stories flowed, one after another, each a unique thread in the rich tapestry of our family's Christmas. As the years went by, the handmade books became a symbol not just of generosity, but of connection. They were a reminder that even in times of plenty, the truest gifts were those that spoke of effort, of imagination, and of the heart. The tradition evolved, too. We started incorporating small, personal trinkets into the books, a pressed leaf from a special place, a small button from a cherished garment, a tiny, smooth stone found on a memorable walk. Each edition was a layer of memory, a touch of personal history woven into the fabric of our shared narrative. When I was in my late teens, nearing adulthood, the world felt like it was changing at an increasingly rapid pace. The small town had grown, the lights were brighter, the cars more numerous. But inside my grandparents' cottage, time seemed to slow, preserved in the warmth of the fire and the comforting scent of wood smoke and gingerbread. Grandpa, though older, still sat in his armchair, his hands still strong, though a little more gnarled. His eyes still held that knowing twinkle, perhaps even brighter now. One Christmas Eve, after all the stories had been told and the last embers glowed softly, he called me over. The air was thick with the comfortable silence that follows a shared meal and cherished traditions. He reached for a small, leather-bound journal that always sat on the table beside his chair. Its cover was smooth and worn, its pages filled with his neat, looping handwriting. "My boy," he said, his voice a little softer than usual, but no less resonant, "I want you to have this." I took the journal, its weight surprisingly substantial in my hands. The leather felt cool and smooth against my fingertips. "What is it, Grandpa?" I asked, my voice hushed. "It's a collection," he replied, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "A collection of all the stories we've told over the years. The stories behind the books, the memories we've shared, the feelings we've woven into our Christmases. And," he added, his gaze meeting mine, a deep, loving sincerity in his eyes, "it's also a reminder of that first promise. The promise that started it all." He placed his hand over mine, his touch warm and reassuring. "You see, a promise isn't just words. It's an act of faith. It's a commitment to bring light into someone's world, even when things seem dark. And sometimes, the most important promises aren't about grand gestures, but about small, heartfelt acts of love." I looked down at the journal, its pages filled with his elegant script, and then back at my grandfather. A profound understanding settled over me, a realization that went beyond childhood wonder. This wasn't just a book of stories, it was a testament to a life lived with purpose, a legacy of love, and the enduring power of a simple promise. The scent of pine from the Christmas tree, the sweet fragrance of my grandmother's last batch of cookies cooling on the counter, the faint smell of old paper and wood smoke, all these sensory memories merged, imprinting that moment deeply into my heart. That year, as I left my grandparents' cottage, the snow was falling again, gentle and silent, coating the world in a fresh, soft blanket. The streetlights cast a warm, golden glow on the pristine white, and the air was still and crisp, carrying the distant sound of church bells. I clutched the journal close, its smooth leather a comfort in my gloved hand. The world outside felt vast and full of unknowns, but I carried within me the warmth of their home, the wisdom of my grandfather's words, and the enduring magic of a promise made at Christmas, a promise that had woven itself into the very fabric of our family. Years passed, as they always do, bringing changes and new chapters. My grandfather, with his twinkling eyes and his endless wellspring of stories, eventually left us. The Christmas following his passing was shrouded in a gentle melancholy, the usual festive cheer tempered by a quiet ache in our hearts. The cottage felt a little emptier, the fire a little less bright. But on Christmas Eve, as we gathered, the familiar sense of pine and baking still lingered, a comforting embrace. My grandmother, her voice softer but steady, brought out the box of handmade books. She looked at each of us, her eyes reflecting a quiet strength. "Your grandfather," she began, her voice a little thick with emotion, "he would want us to continue. He would want the stories to be told, the promises to be remembered." And so, we did. We opened the box, the rustle of tissue paper a familiar sound, and chose our books. That year, I chose Ilara's book, the one my grandfather had made so many years ago. It was very fragile now, its brown paper pages brittle, the calendar pictures faded, but its essence, its spirit, remained vibrant. I held it carefully, tracing the faint outline of the snowy mountains on its cover, and began to tell the story of my grandfather's promise, not just for Ilara, but for all of us. I described the biting cold of that long-ago Christmas Eve, the desperate resolve of a young boy, the careful, painstaking work by the dying firelight, and the incandescent joy on a sick child's face. As I spoke, the silence in the room was profound, filled with shared memories and the lingering presence of the man who had taught us all about the true meaning of Christmas. I could feel the collective warmth, the shared understanding, the quiet strength that comes from family united by love and tradition. Since then, the tradition has continued, carried forward by each new generation. My own children now sit on the braided rug, their eyes wide with wonder as they listen to the stories, their hands eager to explore the handmade books. The scent of wood smoke and gingerbread still fills the air, mingled now with the faint, sweet smell of children's excited anticipation. And sometimes, when the snow is falling softly outside, and the fire is crackling merrily, I'll find myself holding my grandfather's leather journal, running my thumb over its smooth, worn cover. I'll open it to a random page, and his neat, looping handwriting will transport me back, not just to a specific Christmas, but to the feeling of warmth, of love, of the enduring power of a promise made at Christmas that we, as a family, have never forgotten. It is a promise that continues to illuminate our lives, year after year, a beacon of hope and connection in a world that forever seeks both. The story, like the snow, continues to fall, creating new layers of memory, always rooted in that first, simple, beautiful promise. Continua a historia. The years continued their steady march, each turning of the calendar bringing new experiences, new challenges, and new reasons to hold fast to the traditions my grandfather had so lovingly instilled. Our small town flourished, and the world became even more connected, yet the heart of our Christmases remained firmly anchored in the quiet, sensory richness of those handmade books and the stories they held. The sounds of Christmas carols, once only heard on the radio, now filled the air from various devices, but the most cherished melodies were still the quiet hums and soft murmurs of our family gathered around the fire. I remember one particular Christmas, years after my grandfather had passed, when my own daughter, Clara, then about 6 years old, was utterly captivated by the story of Ilara's book. She had heard it countless times, of course, but that year, something shifted within her. She sat on the rug, her small face illuminated by the dancing firelight, listening intently as I recounted the tale. Her eyes, wide and thoughtful, absorbed every detail, the cold outside, the parents' quiet worry, the sick little girl's simple wish, and the boy's unwavering determination. When I finished, a rare quiet descended upon her, a stillness that usually only came with deep thought. The smell of pine from the tree was particularly strong that evening, mingling with the faint, sweet scent of warm milk from the mugs we were holding. Clara looked up at me, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Daddy," she asked, her voice a soft whisper, "can I make a promise book?" My heart swelled with a quiet joy. "Of course, sweet pea," I replied, my voice gentle. "That's what this tradition is all about. Everyone makes one eventually." The very next day, Clara embarked on her project with an intensity that rivaled my grandfather's youthful determination. She rummaged through our craft supplies, a whirlwind of glitter, construction paper, and fabric scraps. The scent of glue and crayons filled her small room. She talked animatedly about the story she wanted to tell, a vibrant, imaginative tale of forest animals who gathered to light a special Christmas star when the real one was hidden by a cloud. Her small fingers, often clumsy with buttons and zippers, worked with surprising dexterity as she cut out shapes and pasted them onto the pages. I remember watching her, a profound sense of continuity washing over me. The rhythmic snipping of scissors, the quiet concentration, the occasional frustrated sigh followed by a triumphant giggle, it was all so familiar, so resonant with the stories I had heard from my grandfather. The air around her was alive with the tangible energy of creation. She chose a piece of shimmering blue fabric for the cover, its smooth, cool texture a pleasant contrast to the rough paper pages inside. On it, she painstakingly glued tiny silver stars, each one catching the light and sparkling with a quiet magic. On Christmas Eve, as the snow gently kissed the window panes and the comforting aroma of my grandmother's traditional roast filled the house, Clara sat proudly amongst us, clutching her handmade book. Her little face was alight with anticipation, her breath coming in quick, excited puffs. My grandmother, now even more frail but still sharp of mind, watched with a soft smile, her eyes full of approval. When it was Clara's turn, she cleared her throat dramatically, a tiny mimicry of my grandfather's own storytelling preparation. Her voice, though small, carried through the quiet room, clear and earnest. She described the fluffy, white snow, so soft it felt like sleeping on a cloud. She spoke of the rustling leaves of the ancient trees, their branches laden with sparkling ice. She made us hear the soft chirping of the forest birds, gathered in anxious whispers, and feel the gentle warmth of the animals' breath as they huddled together, their eyes wide with concern over the missing star. Her words painted a vivid picture, full of sensory details that transported us all to her magical forest. As she concluded her story, holding up the book with its sparkling cover, a wave of emotion washed over me. It wasn't just a child's story, it was a testament to the enduring power of our family's promise, carried forward by a new generation. Clara's little book, imperfectly crafted but brimming with love and imagination, was a direct descendant of Ilara's original. The circle was complete, yet ever expanding. The quiet hum of the room, punctuated by contented sighs, was a beautiful symphony of shared experience. That night, as I tucked Clara into bed, she whispered, "Daddy, do you think Grandpa would have liked my book?" I smoothed her hair, the soft strands feeling like silk beneath my fingers. "He would have loved it, sweet pea," I told her, my voice thick with emotion. "He would have seen the same love and determination in your heart that he had in his own, all those years ago. And he would have been so proud that his promise lives on, through you." The gentle glow of her nightlight cast soft shadows on her sleepy face. I could smell the faint, sweet scent of her shampoo and the lingering aroma of Christmas cookies on her breath. I knew, with absolute certainty, that the spirit of my grandfather, of Ilara, and of that first, profound promise, filled our home and our hearts, not just at Christmas, but all year round. It was a silent, powerful thread that connected us all, across generations, across time. And so, the tradition continues. Each Christmas Eve, the fire crackles, the scents of the season fill the air, and new stories are told, new books are shared. The collection of handmade books grows, a tangible history of our family's love and imagination. Some are faded and worn, their pages fragile with age, while others are bright and new, their colors vibrant with youthful enthusiasm. But each one carries the same message, the same quiet power, that a promise made with love, no matter how small or how humble its beginnings, can grow into a cherished legacy, a source of enduring warmth and connection. The memory of my grandfather, with his kind eyes and his comforting presence, remains as vivid as the brightest Christmas star. And the promise he made, all those many years ago, echoes in the laughter of children, the rustle of handmade pages, and the quiet, heartfelt stories told around a warm fire. It is the true magic of Christmas, woven into the very fabric of our family, a promise that continues to be fulfilled, year after year, in the most beautiful and unexpected ways. It is a story that, like the timeless spirit of Christmas itself, will live on, cherished and recounted, for generations to come. The sensory richness of our Christmas Eve gatherings ensures that the listener is transported, feeling the soft wool of the blankets, smelling the unique blend of wood smoke and baking, hearing the cadence of beloved voices, and tasting the warmth of shared joy. Every touch, every sound, every scent, every sight of the imagination solidifies the story's place in our hearts.